I took my father to an art museum once, and admittedly, I'm the one who is more interested in art. He doesn't know that much about it. And I thought we were having a nice time until we got to this piece, and he had a bit of a moment. He got frustrated by it, and he was like, "Why is this even here? I don't understand. Is this even art?" And I explained that, yes, it's art, and it's here because it's historically significant. I find that people get angry about art, and that doesn't really happen in other museums. No one's really that angry in a natural history museum. And I think specifically the frustration that we have kind of surrounds modern and contemporary art. So let's just take a second to define this. So this is 20th century art, and it has two distinct periods. So modern and contemporary in the English language are synonyms, and we use them kind of interchangeably, but when we're talking about art, these are specific movements that have names and different time periods. So the interesting thing about modern art especially is that the movements are more linked in essence than they are by any kind of cohesive visual style. So Monet's water lilies are in the same category as Andy Warhol's Marilyn Monroe's. I think that we struggle with these two art periods, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So here we're going to back up before modern art. We're starting in the 1500s, and I'll just go kind of every 50 years and I'll show you a painting that is kind of representative of that time. So before modernism, we have spiritual paintings, we have scenes from everyday life, we have military portraits, still lifes, we have landscapes. Here we have famous people in action. We also have celebrities, and here we have members of high society. Take a look at the date on this. We have 1907. Less than 50 years later, we have this. Doesn't that feel like such a complete break? But what are we actually looking at here? It's a drawing by this man that's been erased by this man, and it's being presented as art. And this is pretty challenging, right? Especially after everything that we just saw. And so the kind of feeling is like, well, where did the art go, right? So, okay, so here's some more art for you. And this is maybe just as challenging because it's really hard to know what to do with this after looking at a portrait of Napoleon crossing the Alps. And so maybe, we're too far away from the human form, right? So let's bring it back towards the human. But this is just as challenging. This is 1988. So if you compare these two, you can kind of feel that there's a really big shift that happens. But what caused that? Photography. At the time, photography was seen as an inferior medium. It was commercial, it was tawdry, it was industrial. It didn't take much skill. It was sort of point and shoot. It's a mechanical device, right? No one really considered that it would be an artistic medium in its own right. And we don't really see that happening, gaining acceptance, I guess, until years later. But photography was very interesting to people, and the accessibility of it produced this sort of photographic mania. Here we have military portraits. We're documenting events. Here we have portraits of famous people. Sarah Bernhardt was a famous stage actress at the time. And painters started to fear that, maybe photographers would start taking their jobs. And in fact, in 1839, Paul Delaroche declared that painting was dead. And this was echoed by a number of other artists at this time. It was met with a little bit of fear. And other artists really did embrace it. Like Thomas Aiken saw it as a useful tool to assist his art practice. So he would take pictures and then paint from them. And so he was kind of using it in the same way that Vermeer was using the sort of optical devices like the camera obscura. Other artists really welcomed photography because it changed their art practice, or it changed the way that they were thinking about it. So here we see art kind of becoming a little bit more instantaneous. Some artists really enjoyed photography because it unchained them in a way. They could instead paint the stuff of dreams and imagination. They could paint the things that they were interested in. They could focus on how atmosphere and light impacted color. They could focus on finding new ways to look, and they abandoned traditional art techniques like perspective. Picasso famously said of photography, well, now at least we know everything that painting isn't. Kandinsky was a synesthete, which means he experienced paired sensory perception, so he focused on using art to document sound. The art that he produced appeared not to represent anything from our natural world. Others did continue investigating the natural world, but they did so in a very abstract way. They used fantastical colors. Sometimes they were constructing meaning to make sense of their own lives, like Frida Kahlo, who was involved in a bus accident and shown here with her brace. Others created fantastical landscapes that looked more like the stuff of dreams. A lot of the sentiments of the artists that you've heard from today are echoed by Walter Benjamin, who's a philosopher. And he's talking about the emancipation of art that resulted from mechanical reproduction, so the photograph. And you can see how we've got like very distinct breaks with art tradition. Here, this is Joseph Albers. He's a color theorist and painter, and he's investigating relationships between colors, and in doing so, he only really used simplified forms because that's really all he wanted to do to be looking at. Here might be one of the more challenging pieces that I show you today. This is Marcel Duchamp. He's focused on elevating commonplace objects by showing it as art in a gallery. And in doing this, he raised questions as to the role of the artist and where does the true art lie? Like, is it in the concept or in the execution? And I'll explain further here since it has bearing on our original Sled that led to so much outrage. Duchamp was one of the founding members of the Dada movement, which was a sort of anti-art movement that was spurred by World War I. Dada has deliberately challenged the art world conventions and reveled in absurdity. So that's the tradition that this piece of art comes out of. It's a sculpture, but it looks like something that we sort of recognize already, but its meaning has been added to it by the addition of other objects and its presentation in a gallery space. What do you think it's about? See if you can uncover more about this piece. I put some links in the down below to get you started. And in the meantime, here's a fun experiment that you can try on people. Ask somebody else if they can name an artist for you, and then ask them if they can name an artist that's still alive. For most of the people that I asked, Andy Warhol was about as current as they can get. Let me know what they say in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.